Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose, as long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. This is your hosts, Alex and Sean. On this episode, we have the NBA sending a message to the Bulls, a star player injured for the Cubs, possible silver lining to the Blackhawks season, and free agency opening for the Bears. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. You ever wanted to take your family to a hockey game and then realize that you don't have Bill Gates type money? Well, you're in luck. The BMO Harris Bank Center, where the Ice Hogs play, is less than 90 minutes from the city limits. Tickets starting at just $10. So head on over to icehogs.com, buy yourself a hat, shirt, jersey, tickets, and more. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. Alex, we are on the verge of real things happening in Chicago sports, not just fluff February stories.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. February is always such a down part of Chicago sports because the Bears are never in the Super Bowl. It's right before spring training. And even when the Bulls and Hawks are good, it's always just kind of the dog days, and they haven't been good, so they're even more dog days. But yeah, it seems like we're approaching the tide. Usually when the daylight savings come is when a lot of stuff starts to really happen.
Yeah, and by happening, depending on when you listen to this, free agency starts tomorrow. Well, the dumbest term ever, but the legal tampering time window opens tomorrow for the Bears. So the NFL, they used to have the league season started on a certain day, and you couldn't sign contracts until that day. And the league and everybody else knew that players were negotiating contracts before that, and then they would just announce it. Like, I remember when the Bears signed Julius Peppers, they announced that contract like 10 minutes into the league season. Like, how did you negotiate this massive contract with a player in like 3 minutes, write it up and sign it? It's absolutely impossible. Everybody realized it, so they opened this, quote, 2-day window where you could negotiate things, but it wasn't official until the league opening. So it's like you're allowed to legally tamper.
And this is why I need to tell people, at least at this moment right now, stop saying, why aren't the Bears doing anything? They're just sitting there. They're sitting there. I'm like, well, yeah, technically can't announce anything official yet. So once this officially starts, then you're going to see the Bears doing things. We got a lot of money. We're going to spend some of it. We're going to get some free agents. Just because the Browns are trading everyone and their mother doesn't mean the Bears are just going to sit around and do nothing, because I mean, come on. The Browns just went crazy the other day, and that's not saying the Bears are going to do nothing. Once everything starts up, they're going to start doing things.
Yeah, I mean, do you remember a few years ago when every single year the Redskins would make these big splashes in free agency, and everybody talked, why aren't the Bears doing like the Redskins do? And what did the Redskins win from any of those giant off seasons that they had?
Well, they haven't won a championship in a while, and if they did go to the playoffs, they were pretty much one and done. So, yeah, I mean, nothing major.
Yeah, so that's the issue, is you've got to be smart about things. And not saying that what the Browns are doing isn't smart. It's they've had absolutely abysmal seasons the last several years. The franchise is a laughing stock. They tried to do baseball, Moneyball type things in football, and it didn't work out. So now they have a new general manager. They're going a different direction. They're trying to overhaul a lot of things, and there was a lot of things that needed to be overhauled. That's why you're seeing a lot of move with the Browns. They had Deshaun Kaiser was their best quarterback on their roster.
And
can't have that.
Speaking of like the Moneyball thing, isn't one of the, like their presidents or one of the guys who runs the analysis from like the Mets or something?
It was. They moved on from there, I believe.
Okay. Not surprised, but okay.
Yeah, so that's why they were stockpiling picks for all these. This year they're going to have so many picks because they were trading picks and trading back and getting more picks. And so accumulating picks, which is nice, but in the NFL is you need those picks every year. You can't just bank on the future because it's not like hockey or baseball where guys you draft aren't going to be impacting your professional roster for several years to come. In the NFL, they better hit the ground running or at least in the second year be a significant contributor or they're a bust.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't bank on one draft class. Obviously, you can draft talent in many different areas in the NFL, but if you're basically just relying on one draft class and there are a lot of busts in there, like you said, then in the future, it's like, well, we had all those draft picks one year, but the rest of the years we don't have nearly as many, so we gotta make these work. And we've seen it from the Browns that it hasn't worked. One thing that I always kind of wanted to mention, we probably talked about it before, but I want to talk about it again on the show, is sometimes I think, myself included, we have to remind ourselves that baseball free agency and football free agency, you can't really compare the two because baseball free agency, you're looking for a lot more impact players, a lot more things that are going to make an immediate difference. I'm not saying that doesn't happen in football, but you don't see it at the same rate. A lot of free agency you see in football, especially in the scenario for this Bears team, you're looking for role players, guys that could fill in depth, and that's what the Bears are going to be looking. They're not one free agent signing away from contending. They have plenty of holes to fill. And they're also not going to go around making a bunch of trades because what are you going to trade? You have a core that you're trying to build around. I mean, what would you trade? So don't think of this much in terms of baseball. Think about it as they're trying to build a majority of their core through the draft and then reinforcing it with free agent signings.
Yeah, I should revive and update this analysis. I did maybe 2 years ago, where I went through and I compared the Bears with two teams that most people say are really good at drafting. That's the Patriots and the Packers. And I did an analysis over like a 10-year period, and I found that it's not that any of them hit any higher than the other one. That's Bears versus Packers, Bears versus Patriots, Patriots versus Packers. None of them really hit at a significant higher rate than any of the other ones. It's all about where they hit, what round, and how many picks they have. So the thing that was really significant was the Packers and the Patriots had a lot more picks on average than the Bears. So they have the same hit rate for the most part. And so you're ending up with more players to hit because you have more bites at the apple. And also those teams were more likely to hit on the first round pick. So it was a combination of things. So it's, a big thing is the Bears realize this and they're trying not to trade away picks because they need to replace those. You need young ascending players, not older descending players.
Right, exactly. And I mean, you look at some of the moves that have been made so far, and I mean, for example, like the Richard Sherman thing, you're talking about a guy who has had a really good career, but football age is very different than baseball age, and where Sherman is in football age is that he's really getting older. And the Bears are not going to try to do something like that because they know that his prime years are behind him. Football is a sport where you got to get the most out of your young guys in many positions when they're really young, because that's when they're going to be at their best. Obviously, you have some exceptions like quarterbacks and, maybe a few other positions, but guys like running backs, linemen, you got to get the most out of them when they're young because they age really fast, just because that's football. It's so physical. It's so grueling. 30 years old is considered old in the NFL for many positions.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Richard Sherman because he had an Achilles injury last year, cost him a big chunk of the season. And I know that Achilles injuries and torn ACLs aren't career enders like they used to be when I was a kid. You tore an Achilles, you tore an ACL when I was a kid, and it was over. That such is the case of Ickey Woods of the Bengals Super Bowl fame and the Ickey Shuffle. He would have played now. He would have been able to come back from an ACL injury. But so it's not that the injury so much, it's the age. We got a lot of questions about, are the Bears going to go after Richard Sherman? Are they interested? And I right off the bat, I was like, absolutely not. There's going to be no interest from the Bears. They're not going to reach out because he would, if the Bears were to sign him, he would be the oldest player on the Bears' entire roster, period.
Yeah, that's true. Because Kyle Long is now the oldest player on the roster, technically?
Yep, he's the oldest player on the roster, 29. Richard Sherman, it would be a few months older. So you're not going to go out and sign the oldest in free agency, sign the oldest player of your team. That's not what Ryan Pace does. Ryan Pace, there may be a lot of deception in things he does. Like, nobody saw the trading up to get Mitch Trubisky type thing. But when he tells you things, he flat out told you what he looks for in free agency. Whether or not he hits on it is another story, but he's looking for players that are either in their prime or about to hit their prime. So you are signing guys to a contract where it's future expectation that you're paying for, not past performance.
Yeah, we've kind of seen that concept being applied to some of the free agents already. Again, some of them have not worked out because of injury. He saw the potentials in Pernell McPhee. That's how he got Akeem Hicks, because he saw the skill he had, and he's like, this guy's entering his own right now. Let's get him. And that's kind of what he did. And that's, like you said, that's what they're going to continue to do. Richard Sherman certainly would not fit that bill as well as many others. And like I said, you're not one piece away from contending. So, I think that's also a big factor in it as well.
Yeah. There was, zero chance that they were going to sign him. And it sort of guides you who the Bears are probably going to key on when free agency starts, because right now the Bears are very quiet. There's very, very little news of what they're doing. But as they showed in the draft last year, is there are no leaks in the Bears front office right now.
No, there are not.
That is a tight ship. And anything that's coming out is things that are being floated out there. So
exactly.
So last week when we were talking we didn't know who was going to be free, franchise tagged or what. So we now know that Jarvis Landry was franchise tagged, and then the Dolphins traded him to the Browns. And I know a lot of Bears fans were very upset by this, but here's the thing. You can't negotiate a contract with Jarvis Landry before you trade for him. And you're going to have to give up draft compensation to get him. Plus you're going to have to pay him a ton of money. And he's a slot receiver. He's not an outside receiver. So that's a lot to give up for a guy like that. And sure, he's a talented guy, but it's a lot to give up for a guy that's not Antonio Brown or Odell Beckham Jr. Who's a whole nother story right now. Yeah, really. But yeah, no, you're totally right about that. The whole Landry thing, I mean, what
what caught my attention with that more than anything, and I probably said this on the last show, but I'll say it again, it was the whole idea that people were proposing that Nagy didn't think Howard fit the system because he wasn't a good catcher and he's going to be a pass offense type guy. That's what really caught my attention more than anything. It wasn't just like getting Jarvis Landry or whatever. To me, going out and getting a huge receiver like that, I don't know what the fit would be like. I don't know. So I was really more concerned about, not as much concerned, but just curious over, is it really true that he wouldn't want a guy like Howard because of his coaching style? I mean, that's what got my attention more than anything.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty much that, sure, in the NFL, you don't value running backs nearly as high as you did when I was younger. But you have a guy like Jordan Howard, and those guys don't come along that often. And you still have him he's making like $500,000 or $600,000 a year. And you're going to trade him for a slot receiver that's you're going to have to pay, that you may lose after one season and is going to be making like $15 or $16 million. That's a big difference. And that's not smart football.
No, it really isn't. And it's funny because you mentioned about the value of running backs. It's one of those things where, yeah, obviously we know why that's the case because it's a passer's game. But when you have a good player that does a lot of good things, even though they struggle in one department, it's really kind of hard to part with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Last week we were talking we didn't know, it was before the deadline to franchise tag or transition tag somebody. So we have the final results in. It was pretty obvious DeMarcus Lawrence was going to get franchise tagged, and he was. Ziggy Ansah, he was a question, but the Lions did franchise tag him. So your two best pass rushers are off the board, unless you want to give up an arm and leg to trade for him. It was an interesting one in Los Angeles because they had their safety and wide receiver Sammy Watkins that they were debating who to franchise. They chose to franchise the safety, meaning Sammy Watkins is now free and clear. And like I said, Landry was tagged and then traded. But Kyle Fuller was transition tagged. And I read it was like the first transition tag in like more than a dozen years.
Was it really?
Yeah, I know it's available, but really nobody uses it.
No.
So what the difference is, so there's like exclusive franchise tags, non-exclusive. And then there's the transition tag. So the Bears transition tagged, and what happens is that Kyle Fuller is able to go out and try to sign, negotiate contracts with other teams. And if he negotiates something, the Bears can match the offer and sign him. But if somebody else signs him away, they don't lose, or they don't gain any sort of compensation. Whereas with the franchise tag, you get, the other team has to give you 2 first-round picks if they sign somebody away. So it's very trade prohibitive. But Kyle Fuller, so it's basically they're saying to Kyle Fuller, we don't think you're a 16 or 15.9 or whatever $1 million player, but we want you back. So we would rather match a contract and sign you long-term and see what your market value is and bring you back. So it's very likely that Kyle Fuller returns, because I think not a lot of teams are going to waste their time trying to negotiate a contract knowing the Bears have more money. They have, I think, a top 5 available money, and they have,
I would sure hope so with all the money they have.
Yeah, they're top 5, and they have ability to easily cut more players to move up to top 2 or 3. So they have more money than most teams, and they have a bigger need than most teams, and he's a homegrown guy. So I think most teams are going to be like, why am I going to negotiate a big contract with this guy knowing the Bears are just going to match it? It's wasting my time when I could be trying to sign somebody else. Also working in the Bears' favor is there's a lot of really talented cornerbacks in this class. So it's gonna push Kyle. I mean, Kyle Fuller's not gonna go poor with this contract, but I think it'll push it down lower than it would in other years.
Yeah, and that's all why I'm really kind of glad he did this whole thing. I think it works out perfectly in the Bears' favor. And when I saw that they put on the transition tag, I almost had to rub my eyes. I'm like, is this real? Who does that? But, Pace did it, and really, I saw probably more positive feedback on a Pace move than I've ever seen before by the Bears fan base.
I think it's a smart move for both sides. Franchise tagging a player, a lot of... Other than the DeMarcus Lawrence case this year where he was just happy to sign it, he didn't care. Most players don't like it because they want to get the long-term contract and have that security of the guaranteed money.
Right.
But they don't like the franchise tag because it bullies them in the corner of either they've got to accept this team, more, on a scale of one side being all on the side of the player and the other side all on the side of the team. It's going to be much closer to the team side because they can only negotiate with one team. Or they have to play under that 1 year contract, and it's worth a lot of money, but if you get injured or something, that's the last of your meal ticket. But at least with this transition tag, it allows Kyle Fuller to go out and say, what is my market? And find out from other teams what they're willing to pay. And so he can actually gauge and say, all right, this is what I'm worth. And the Bears are willing to pay me the highest amount that anybody's willing to pay me. I'm going to come back. I'm already leaning that way anyway. So it just a nice match.
It really is a smart move. I mean, the more you think about it, that really is a smart move.
So people are upset that they're not seeing a lot of moves from the Bears at this point. But you're going to see in most likely tomorrow, but probably a little bit into Tuesday, you're going to see a lot of movement from the Bears. And it's a lot of it's going to come out of the woodwork. They're absolutely going to work on wide receivers. And I don't know if it's going to be Sammy Watkins and Allen Robinson, but I have a feeling you're going to see an Albert Wilson signing, which he's a nice guy to have. He's definitely not a top end guy, but I think they're going to try to establish this a nice roster of wide receivers. So you have multiple targets and then try to add a top end piece either through free agency or the draft on top of it. But they realize they can't rely on one guy anymore.
Well, exactly. And plus, you could go into free agency and build decent depth. That doesn't mean you're going to go out and sign your number one wide receiver. You might just do that in the draft because, let's face it, you need to redo the whole core from top to bottom because they had nothing last year. And part of rebuilding an entire wide receiver core is getting depth guys. And depth guys aren't necessarily number ones, but if they think they're going to be productive enough for Mitchell Trubisky in the offense next year, then those are the kind of moves you're probably going to see first and foremost, unless they pull out a big surprise. But what I'm really kind of expecting is a lot of depth moves and then kind of establishing where they are going into the draft in terms of what they're going to draft in the wide receiver department.
And the thing is with this wide receiver class, is sure there's a lot of exciting sounding names that are in the draft or in the wide receiver class for the free agency. Nobody is like a slam dunk type guy. Sammy Watkins and Allen Robinson are the two big names, but I think most people would agree Sammy Watkins is not a true number one type guy. And the numbers he put up last year with that Rams offense showed he wasn't a number one guy, but he's absolutely got the ability to be a number one guy. He just has never put it together. Allen Robinson is a guy that's coming off of a serious injury. You've got Paul Richardson, who has done okay, but it's in a unique style offense with that Seattle offense. Danny Amendola is old. You already had Dontrell Inman in house, and he's a really good route runner, but he didn't have a great performance. But it was a different offensive regime there too. Taylor Gabriel's a speed guy, but can he put it all together? Dante Moncrief has talent, but never put it together. Albert Wilson is a more known commodity, but he's not a top end guy. Terrell Pryor is an enigma. He's 1 year, he looks great, and then he signs a 1 year prove it deal and stinks. So there's a lot of guys that they're still question marks, and so it's it's a little scary of putting all your money in one, or all your eggs in one basket.
Right, and that's why I kind of see the balance between draft and free agency. The nice thing is, we've talked about it just recently, how the Bears have so much money, is that, they can take a chance on a couple of guys. Even if you're not signing them to big deals, you could take a chance on a couple of guys, and it's not like you're tightly wound for cash. You have so much cash to give out that you can take a chance. And maybe there's a low risk, high reward, a number of low risk, high reward moves you could make. Maybe they'll pay off. So that's why I'm not overly worried about wasting money when it comes to receivers. The biggest thing is we just want them to produce. I mean, that's the big thing, but I'm not really worried about the money, if that makes sense.
And I started looking at more of the free agents yesterday, and as I started looking at it, a few names started to creep up on me that I was like, this could make sense. I had been focusing on guards before because we parted ways with Josh Sitton, and Kyle Long is coming off of a 2 surgery off season, including neck surgery. So you don't know what you're going to get out of him. And I was like, there's really only one good guard that's available in free agency, and you have to feel that he's going to sign huge, stupid money that you don't want to pay to a guard. I'm like, what are you going to do? Are you going to rely on the draft? And then I started thinking, I was like, you know what? They're trying to protect this young quarterback and give him the best opportunity to do well. So why wouldn't they sign a veteran center and move, your converted guard in Cody Whitehair back to guard from center, and then sign a veteran center who's you're gonna have a better chance at better snaps, better quarterback center exchanges. And I was like, that makes sense to me. Centers, you can usually, there's no like huge names out there, so you can probably sign one for a much cheaper deal than you would with Andrew Narwhal. But there's Weston Richburg, Spencer Long, and John Sullivan, John Sullivan especially because he was the center for the Rams last year. So you saw him work exchange with essentially a rookie quarterback.
Yeah, those are all real good points. I like that thought process.
Yeah, I like it too. Cody Whitehair played really well at center, but there was some exchange problems along the way. And
for sure,
when you have a quarterback that doesn't have a lot of college experience in general, and very, very little experience going under center, you'd much rather have a guy who he's going to be rock solid when he makes that snap every time. And if the quarterback makes a mistake, that's fine. You can build off of that. But the issue could be from the center, or it could be from the quarterback, or it could be from both. That's too much risk for me. So I think that might be the way to go.
Yeah. No, it's all valid.
We know the Bears are going to have to make a move as edge rusher because they really don't have any. 2 names that sort of popped up were Trent Murphy and Barkevius Mingo. Both of those guys are sort of underperformers, but they both performed the best when they weren't solely an edge rusher, when they would situationally rush, but they would also drop back into coverage and do some hybrid type things. And that's exactly what the Bears have asked of their edge rushers in their 3-4 system. And I'm like, they're both 27. So you know they're still in that window of prime. Neither one is going to be that expensive, so you could add them fairly cheaply. So I was like, those are two intriguing names I could see to, if nothing else, provide you guys that have done it in the league and fill those holes. So if you draft somebody better, you could push them down the roster and make them depth guys rather than starters.
I mean, if they do an adequate job and they're versatile, I think that would be pretty much what you could ask for those kind of guys. And if they are indeed your depth guys, if they still do the same thing, if they're, decent at what they do, again, that's better than nothing. And the Bears have nothing in those terms.
And then they're still down a defensive lineman. We know Akeem Hicks, we know Eddie Goldman. Who's going to step up and take that other position? Mitch Ryan is a free agent, but there's some bigger name guys. And if the Bears can't get a pass rusher from the outside, they may want to take a look at some of the defensive linemen that can push the pocket from the center. Because if you have Akeem Hicks and then somebody on the other side that's also able to do Akeem Hicks-like things, it makes the necessity of an outside pass rusher a little less important. And some of those guys would be Sheldon Richardson, Muhammad Wilkerson, and Dontari Poe, who are all still in their 20s and are free agents.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with any of that stuff right there. I haven't done as much research in that department, but I mean, I know if those would be options to go for. It's my one concern is if we sign those guys and we don't score on anything in the draft, you could say, okay, they'll do an adequate job or a decent job, but will they will they excel? Because you kind of need some of these guys to excel, don't you? I mean, that's just one little nagging concern, but obviously a lot of time will tell where that ends up.
Well, you fully expect Leonard Floyd to take a big step forward
if healthy
next year.
If healthy.
If healthy. If healthy, you expect Akeem Hicks to do Akeem Hicks-like things, and Akeem Hicks looks much, much better when Leonard Floyd is healthy because he's not getting all the double teams. But you add a guy like Sheldon Richardson or Muhammad Wilkerson, and when they want to play, they're both forces. And then I really, honestly, I'm just looking at, barring any weird trades at the top of the draft, it's looking more and more like it might be Tremaine Edmonds as the Bears pick. And he's a speed guy that you could put, he's very versatile. He's a guy that you could put him as out in coverage, or he can rush the passer from the outside linebacker position. So you're looking to add top end talent that position too. So I just don't know if they have to excel. They just have to be solid.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That really is. One question I have is, of the two guys you named that were free agents, if you had to pick one, who would you rather go with?
From the edge or the defensive line?
Defensive line.
I mean, honestly, Sheldon Richardson would probably be my top, but I don't even know if he's on. I think he's looking to go to a contender. I think Dontari Poe would be really good. He signed with the Falcons expecting to be a pass rusher, and wasn't put in the opportunity to be that type of guy. I think with the Bears, he'd have the opportunity to. Eddie Goldman's the guy that's going to anchor in the middle, and you're looking at Dontari Poe would have free reign to go after the quarterback and push that pocket. I think that would be a good spot for him. I think he command really good money, but I think it would be not earth-shattering money. So I would say Dontari Poe, of those three names.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that because, like you said, he didn't get the opportunity to do exactly what he wanted to do down there. So if he can see the opportunity here, even though it's not necessarily a contender yet, it would fit him well. And if he could get some cash, I feel like that would be give him a decent chance to come here, wouldn't you think? But we'll see.
Yeah, because you're gonna have to be creative to fill the defensive line gaps and holes. Because honestly, the best pass rusher available in the free agent market since Ziggy Ansah and DeMarcus Lawrence were franchise tagged, your best option is Julius Peppers, and he's like 400 years old.
Yeah.
So there's really not a lot of guys that are really good edge rushers. So you're gonna have to be creative, and you're gonna have to sign guys really on some potential and cross your fingers.
Yeah, no, exactly. Every time I think of Julius Peppers, I shudder. I picture him almost sacking Rodgers on the final week of Week 13. So, yeah, that name makes me shudder. And he's 38 years old. That I don't think that's an option.
Yeah, Bears are definitely not going to sign Julius Peppers. But that's just staying the state of pass rushers.
Yeah.
Is a 38-year-old guy who's like 17th year in the league, and people were like, is he going to even come back? He's your best option. You're going to have to be creative, and hopefully Vic Fangio has a lot of input on guys that he thinks he could turn around. So I think that's why I was saying Barkevius Mingo and Trent Murphy are guys, because neither one has lived up to expectations, and I think they could fare better, much better with Vic Fangio and in Vic Fangio's system than elsewhere. And it buys you time until you can either draft somebody or trade for somebody, but it's there's a lot of holes to fill and not a lot of people to fill them.
Yep, exactly. And at least those guys wouldn't break the bank by any means.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But it's going to be interesting because the Bears are very secretive and have been good at holding secrets. So anything that does happen over the next 2 days is going to be a surprise.
Yeah, no, I'm just kind of waiting to be shocked by something. That's why I'm kind of looking forward to it. Obviously, you're not going to be shocked at the move that's suddenly going to turn everything around, but you could say, wow, that didn't expect that, but that's a pretty good fit. Or maybe we'll be saying, really? Why'd we do that? Or maybe we'll be saying, we'll see. You're probably going to see a lot of, okay, I could see that, and we'll see. You're not going to see a lot of, this is going to turn our franchise around. You're just not going to see that at all. But as long as we can make some signings that make good impacts now and for the future and can fill some holes, I mean, that's really what we're looking for here.
Yeah, there's no guy who's going to change the course of this franchise as a single player in this free agent class. None whatsoever. And even if they got Allen Robinson and Andrew Norwell and Don Terry Poe and Trumaine Johnson, none of those guys are guys that are going to be that is going to turn the whole franchise around. So it's going to be guys that at best are going to be solid at their position, and you're still going to have to build your top guys through the draft.
Yeah, because when you think about it, look at the signings of previous years and look at what's available now. You're seeing a lot of the similar scenarios where you're not looking at a free agent class thinking, oh, that's going to change the direction. That's going to change the direction. You're signing guys, you're like, okay, that fills a hole. And the whole mentor thing, I think, like when we signed Quentin Demps last year, I thought, okay, he's a veteran guy. He's a little older, but he's got experience and he had a solid year the year before, nothing earth-shattering, but he's had a solid career overall, and maybe he'll be kind of a mentor to new guys they draft. I still kind of have that mentality. I just, for a number of positions, obviously some you're just looking for holes to fill, but some you're like, okay, you're signing these free agent veterans to help guys along the way, but said veterans will hopefully have a little more left in the tank to also contribute. But I'll still kind of see some of these moves as Pace saying, we're looking for guys to kind of help bring up some of our young draftees and assets, because, you know, those can play an important role sometimes. And when you sign those kind of guys, you can't expect something overly flashy. Like Quentin Demps, I never expected him to be great, but, you know, I thought he would at least be something solid there, to both fill a hole and be kind of a mentor for the younger guys. Obviously that didn't happen, but that's kind of the mindset I'm looking at with a lot of these free agents.
Yeah, your real hope here is just holding down the fort until you can draft somebody.
That's a perfect way of putting it, holding down the fort.
And you want to break the bank because you want to preserve money for when you're inevitably going to have to re-sign good draft picks. So you don't want to be in a cap situation, and when you're not a playoff team, it's a bad place to be.
Yeah, no doubt.
So no sense in spending all the money, but you're going to see a lot of move by the Bears, a lot of movement, and I think it's going to be names that aren't as sexy. I think you're going to see an Albert Wilson. You'll maybe a John Sullivan, like a Trent Murphy-ish, re-signing Kyle Fuller. I wouldn't be shocked if they re-sign Prince Amukamara. There's going to be a lot of fans that wake up, Wednesday morning going, I wanted, some huge signing that didn't happen.
Yeah, so don't have your expectations overly high. Like I said, just expect role fillers, mentors, hole fillers, if you want to call them. Just, as long as you're looking at this from the perspective of that, then I think that us Bears fans can look at it with an overall positive view without, uncorking champagne and doing stuff like that.
Yeah, so next week we'll break down more of what some of the Bears' moves were, and I think there's going to be a big flurry on Monday, Tuesday, and then there'll be a second wave later on of guys to plug the holes after the draft. Once you see who you've drafted and where you still have holes, so we'll break down that more in the coming weeks. Right now, it's just all speculation, and it's hard to speculate on a team that holds water so well.
Yeah, so secretive.
All right, so don't have too much else after the Bears. I wanted to talk a little bit of Cubs, a little bit of Hawks, and a little bit of Bulls. Which one did you want to talk about first?
Let's go to baseball. All
right. I guess the biggest news, Jake Arrieta signed with the Phillies. So my wife, as a Phillies fan, is very excited about this. And it is far short of the $200 million that we had been hearing about.
Well, to me, the whole thing is the years, because we were expecting it over a long period of time, but he's still getting 25 plus million a year, even though the original reported deal was 3 years, but I'm seeing things come out now. Mentioned on Twitter by John Heyman. I retweeted it. Hold on, let me find it. Arrieta's salaries, $30 million in the first year, 25 in the second year, and 20 million. Can opt out after 2. Deal could go to 5 years and be worth 125 million to 135 million. So he's still going to be making a lot of money every year. It's just you didn't get the longevity that we thought, because people are saying, minimum 5 years. And I think that's what Boris was pushing for. But at the end of the day, Boris still got his client $25+ million a year, at least for the first 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's per year average is more than what you Darvish signed for.
Yeah, and that's what I've been saying. I mean, look, Jake Arrieta was amazing as a Cub from 2013 to 2016, and he was completely worth having on the team in those years. But going forward with the decline we've seen in the velocity, the command, and everything, I wouldn't give that money to Jake Arrieta. I'd give something similar like that to Yu Darvish, and Yu Darvish isn't getting quite that, even though he has more years on his deal.
Yeah, and you're seeing just the filthy stuff that he throws already in the preseason.
Yeah, I mean, he's struck out a lot of guys. He's hitting 95 on the gun. His first start looked good. And today, his first few innings looked good. He was charged with 2 earned runs when he left. He gave up an RBI single, and then whoever came in for him gave up a run that was charged to him. At least I believe that's how it went down. I know he gave up an RBI single. I just know there was another run charged to him. I wasn't sure if he gave it up or it was an inherited runner. But, I mean, overall, the strikeout stuff looks good. The fastball looks good. The command was shaky early on. He had some wild pitches in his first start and a couple of walks, but he was able to lock down the command pretty quickly after some of the wildness. So I like a lot of what I've seen from Yu Darvish so far.
Yeah, he's making some batters look stupid up there because, what do you have? 4 or 5 straight strikeouts today.
Yeah, I know he struck out the side 1 inning, and that was the second time he struck out the side this spring. He did it in the first inning, even though he walked 2 guys and gave up a run on a wild pitch. But yeah, he's been racking up the strikeouts.
Yeah, so I like that, and as much as I like Jake Arrieta, and I have no ill will towards him, I feel very much like I do with our friend that went down to the bitter enemy in St. Louis. I'm happy for him, but I didn't really want to see him make as much as money he's making on the Cubs. So welcome Yu Darvish and good luck Jake Arrieta.
Yeah, you summed it up perfectly right there. Those are my exact feelings. I think what is going to be interesting to see is how Arrieta does in his first year as a Philly. If things continue to decline, you're going to see a lot of talk about, we're giving him a lot of money. But technically, that's the most money he's going to be making is in that first year. Obviously, it's still a lot of money in the remaining years, but the most is that first year. If he gets off to a really good start, then, we'll see what happens in his future. He could be getting extensions. He could be in Philly even longer because Philadelphia, this move tells me that they're trying to win right now and that they've done that with not only Arrieta, but they got, that guy from the Indians, Carlos Santana. So they're trying to win now. It's pretty interesting, but this is going to be a very telling season for Jake Arrieta.
The only thing that bothers me about Arrieta signing to Philadelphia is the top 2 picks of Philadelphia in the next draft are already accounted for. So because the Cubs tendered Jake Arrieta, they get draft compensation, but they only get the Phillies' 3rd highest pick, which is the number 79 overall in the draft.
I'd rather have that than have him pitching against us in a critical game with the Milwaukee Brewers or the St. Louis Cardinals or even the Washington Nationals in a playoff series.
Yeah, but Minnesota would have been nice.
Oh, that would have been nice, but there was no way he was going there.
No, they ended up with Lance Lynn. So good luck, Jake Arrieta. The 2 other points I had were we got a major scare this week with Javi Baez.
Yes, we did. When I heard the words hamstring and discomfort, I thought, oh, crap.
Yeah, it was, when they're like, oh, he's being helped off the field, there's a hamstring injury. You're like, no. So it was a scary thing.
But luckily, it was just a little cramp, dehydration. They're taking precaution. Doesn't sound overly serious. And the interesting thing is, he felt the tug as he left the box, but he was still able to get into second base on a double. So, I'm not a doctor. I'm not, a sports trainer. But I feel like if it were a lot more serious, he wouldn't be able to make it to second base.
Yeah, so it ended up just being cramps. He's not staying hydrated, he said. But it just reminded me of, was it 2 seasons ago when was it Jason Hamill was making sure he ate potato chips because of the salt, so he'd stay hydrated. He would, make him want to drink water to stay hydrated.
Yeah.
So I'm like
2016.
Yeah, so I'm like, his Javi Baez going to sit and eating Lay's in the dugout?
Hey, El Mago chips. Make it happen.
And the other topic is, somebody asked me if the Cubs would consider, because Greg Holland is still sitting on the shelf, does not have any suitors yet. Is that something that the Cubs would be interested in, signing him to a short-term deal, maybe even a 1-year deal, to have him as the closer? And I think the Cubs would be very open to that, except for one thing, is just like we said with Arrieta, is Greg Holland was tendered. So if the Cubs were to sign him, they would have to give up a draft compensation, and your compensation that you got for Jake Arrieta leaving is not anywhere near the pick that you would give up. So I just don't think the Cubs would be willing to give up that compensation on a short-term deal.
Yeah, I don't know if they're really interested, period. I think that could be one reason, but their bullpen, for the most part, seems pretty set. You can never have enough pitching. You can never add enough pitching, but, I don't know. I'm just not sure that that's something that they're really overly interested in. He's going to be, 32? Yeah, he just turned 32. Last year, he had an all-star season with Colorado. Obviously, his numbers were blown up a little bit because of Colorado, but 3.61 ERA, 3.72 FIP, 1.15 WHIP. And that was after he missed all of 16. And then 2015, good year, but down by his 2 all-star seasons in 13-14. So I still think he's valuable, but projections are showing him to decline. Like the ones on Baseball Reference, and you don't have to take full stock on this. I'm just pointing this out, that his projections right now are a 4.17 ERA and 1.3 WHIP. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but there may be a chance that teams aren't interested in him, and maybe the Cubs included, just because they expect a decline from him, and they expect that his best years, ranging from 11 to 14, are behind him.
That's good analysis of it. I don't see any way that the Cubs make a move on him unless he came at some bargain basement price, and I still don't see that. I think they're pretty happy with what they have, and I think we're already seeing what the roster we're going to go forward in the season is. Not going to be a lot of surprises.
Yeah, no, I think really when we look at the roster, there's just going to be a few guys at the bottom. I think Justin Grimm's going to get cut because he still stinks. It's going to be about kind of depth. Are you going to have 3 catchers? Are you going to have Caratini and Jimenez start up? Are you going to have Peter Borges up? I mean, I think those are really the only real questions on the roster left. I wanted to ask you this really quick. One of my guys who I work with at Cubby's Crib, Adam McGinnis, he wrote a piece on saying, what would you feel like if they brought Chris Coughlin back to a minor league deal? Personally, I'd actually really like that. I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I always like Coughlin, and I wouldn't be against it. I mean, he showed flashes of potential That's why he was drafted so high. Was rookie of the year, right?
Yes, he was.
And he had some timely hitting when the first stint with the Cubs, and it's always nice to have a guy who's been on the major league roster that can talk up young guys of what the culture is like, down there. So I don't think it's a bad thing. And he's a guy that has been a clutch hitter in the past. So if you had to bring him up, then he showed he was hitting well in the minors and he found his way up. He's done it in the clutch before. So I'm not against it.
It's like they talked about with Adam and a few other people on Twitter, and they brought up this same point too, is if you have a key outfield injury and you need to call up somebody, it's either Peter Borges or Mark Zagunis. And Mark Zagunis, he's a prospect. He's got some promise, but he hasn't really established himself yet. And, maybe he will eventually. But I feel like if you had a proven guy like Coghlan be able to come up and fill a gap, that would be a pretty nice thing to have. In his time with the Cubs, he's just been incredibly useful. His first year as a Cub in 2014, he was a pleasant surprise, 283, 352, 804 OPS. And then in 2015, 250, 341. And then he came back in 2016 after just some awful play with the Oakland Athletics. He came back and slashed 252, 391 on base, 779 OPS in 48 games. So there must be something about the Cubs that really brings out the good in him, because ever since his rookie year, he had a decent year in 2010, but in 2011, he really wasn't any good. He was awful in 2012, 2013, 70 games, pretty mediocre. But his time with the Cubs, it's been really productive as a platoon guy. So I'd kind of like that.
Yeah, I'm all for that. And you were saying before that, one of the questions is, will the Cubs keep 3 catchers? And I don't know about you, but I would be really shocked if they brought 3 catchers for opening day. And only because Jimenez was brought here pretty much guaranteed the backup spot because he's spent a long time as a backup catcher, so he knows the role and the responsibility. He's shown that he's been able to come off cold and be able to hit. And Victor Caratini is a young guy, and you want to get him as many at-bats and plate appearances as possible. And you're not going to do that with Wilson Contreras there. So I just see they send him down to Iowa and let him play every day, because he's like the ultimate, log jammed guy. So you're probably looking to showcase him to trade him potentially. So he's either going to be filling for injury or trade bait. So you want to see what he can do. You want to see him play every day. So I would be really shocked if they carried him along.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. Caratini can't just rot on the bench and expect to develop. You got to be playing every day. My one concern is he's shown that he's got a lot of work to do in the majors, but last year you saw some good things from Victor Caratini in the majors. My one concern is that getting a bunch of at-bats in the minors just isn't going to do anything anymore when it comes to development. He knows he could hit minor league pitching. It's all about what he could do in the majors. That's my whole thing with that. But I also agree with the fact that Jimenez was brought in for the purpose you said, and I think that having a veteran, experienced catcher like that is important on every squad. You had David Ross for a number of years. Last year you had Rene Rivera, and now you got a guy like Chris Jimenez. It's just kind of an important thing to have. So, that's why it makes it a little more difficult for me. If it was Jimenez and Contreras and Victor Caratini spending the first month or so just in the minors playing every day, then yeah, I think that's probably the most logical way to go. But eventually you're going to have Caratini play a certain amount of time in the majors.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think you're going to see it more later on. I think they had him play some first base, didn't they, last year?
Yeah, a few games he was at first.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if, inevitably when Rizzo gets some tightness in his back, and especially, when there's September call-ups, if they bring him up and get him some regular playing time. But I agree with you that you can't develop without hitting major league talent, but I don't think that the Cubs are developing him for future play for the Cubs. I think they're developing him to trade away. So in that sense is let him play every day and show that he's just killing AAA pitching and then let him develop in the major league somewhere else.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little conflicted. I think that it would make sense that they'd want to trade him, but at the same time, I feel like he's another young asset that could be something important for the future. Just because, Wilson Contreras is probably going to be your long-term solution, but, with catchers, you never know with health. And after him and Caratini, there's really nothing right now in terms of catching prospects that are anywhere near the big leagues. So that's why the whole Caratini thing to me, it's that one I'm just racking my brain over. And maybe I'm overthinking it a little bit too much, but I've been racking my brain with the Caratini thing for a while now.
Yeah, I mean, my thinking is that you want to make sure that your farm system comes in waves. So it's, you don't have guys coming right up behind somebody else, because that creates a log jam and some issues. You want to have guys that are a couple years away once you have guys that you brought up to the majors, because when those guys are ready for new contracts, if you can't afford to pay everybody, then you can replace those with guys that are ready to come up from the minors at that point. Caratini's way too close to Wilson Contreras, and that's where the problem is. And I agree with you. You need a reserve, because if something happens, God forbid, to Wilson Contreras, you don't want Jimenez playing every day. And if you don't have Caratini, what are you going to do? But that's a pretty valuable that's an insurance policy that's an awfully valuable insurance policy that you could use to trade for some pitching prospects or some younger, several younger prospects that you can bring up closer to when your big players on the roster are going to be due for contracts.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why it gets a little difficult sometimes thinking about that. Is
there anything else, Cubs, you wanted to talk about?
Yes, actually, there was one topic that I really wanted to talk about, and I figured it was best to save it for last. And this is a topic we've obviously discussed many times before, but I feel like it's kind of relevant considering what happened in yesterday's spring training game. I don't know if you saw it. I'm sure you heard about it. Yesterday, it was Cubs versus White Sox.
I didn't want to see it, but it happened.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, are we talking about Eloy Jimenez?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's one of those things is we knew what we were giving up, and it just sucks that it got rubbed in our faces. But, we gave up a lot, but we got a lot. It's how it works.
Yeah. It's a trade I do 10 times out of 10. I wrote an article for Wrigley Report. It hasn't been published yet, but my whole thing is it's okay to sometimes have mixed feelings, because the trade was all worth it. We got a great controllable pitcher in return. This great controllable pitcher financially allowed the Cubs to make other moves, including Yu Darvish, as Theo Epstein said. So it was absolutely a great trade. But I would be lying if there was a little part of me seeing Eloy round the bases after that bomb thinking, this guy was once ours, and now he's on the other side of town. And yeah, I gotta admit, sometimes thinking about it does kind of suck a little bit. I mean, this kid is looking like he's going to be a bona fide generational superstar. His power is unbelievable. The fact that he's able to have that kind of power and still have on-base percentages near the 400 mark, I mean, that's insane. And he's probably, if he does pan out, he's probably going to be an MVP type player for much of his career. And he's going to be doing it where we're exposed to it every day. It's in the same city. We're exposed to that every single day. If he does great things day in and day out, you're going to hear about it. Gleyber Torres in New York, not so much. Obviously, if you pay close attention to baseball, you'll see it. But, I mean, you're going to see it on the newsreels in Chicago. You're going to see it in the local newspapers. You're going to see Eloy Jimenez, an asset that we once had, destroy for the White Sox. And I'm glad the trade happened. I am. But there's still, every now and then, I look at that and say, damn.
Here's my thing about it is he looks great so far, and when you see him play in the minors, you're like, this guy is, you're right, it looks like a generational superstar, like face of baseball type talent. But you think back a couple years and you're like, you think guy with absolutely monster power that gets on base at a high percentage and was compared to a front office to Babe Ruth. You had a guy like that. You still have the guy like that. And he's done good things for you, but he's also done some terrible things for you in Kyle Schwarber. So you never know what's going to happen. We didn't want to trade Kyle Schwarber because he was a can't miss guy with power and on base. And did you see what he did in the playoffs against the Mets? And so you just don't know exactly what's going to happen when Eloy comes up. Look at how long it's taken. What is his name? Byron Buxton in Minnesota. That guy's been the next major superstar for like 5 years now, and still hasn't gotten to that point. It's until you've done it, you haven't done it.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. And I'm really trying to not sound like I'm complaining here because, again, like I said, I do the trade 10 times out of 10. I'm glad that they got Jose Quintana. He's going to be a big part of this team for a number of years to come. I'm just saying, if he works out, then you're going to see him on highlight reels constantly, and it's going to be a reminder of what you once had. And, sometimes you just got to think, dang, that was a guy you once had. You mentioned Kyle Schwarber in the comparison. I'd make another comparison as well to a guy we once had. I'm sure you could think of who I'm thinking about right now.
Don't say Felix PA.
No.
Jerome Walton?
No, think recent.
Oh.
Like, this is almost an exact comparison.
I don't know. Who are you thinking of?
Soler.
Oh, yeah. So, man, I forgot about him already.
I mean, do you remember the hype of him? It was Eloy Jimenez-esque.
Yeah, I mean, 19 years old and superstar in training. And every time I see him step up to the plate, I'm like, he's a guy, you look at him and you're like, I can't give up on him yet. And you sort of got to give up on him already because he's not going to do it.
It's the concern for Eloy potentially, like Steve Stone said on the broadcast yesterday, is similar to Soler as well, and that's injury. And unfortunately, Eloy, he's had some nagging injuries, nothing serious, and I'm not saying that's going to completely derail his career. I am reinforcing your point that you truly do never know. Look at this stat. In 2014, before he came up to the big leagues, between AAA and AA, he slashed 340, 432 with an OPS of 1.132, 15 home runs. Those are technically better numbers than Eloy Jimenez, but he hasn't played in AAA yet. So that's the guy I'd compare to the most, more than Schwarber personally, because, just because of the type of player and the type of environment they came from, I think that's more of an accurate comparison in terms of coming up from the minors. I think Eloy is going to work out unless there is an injury. I really do. So my whole point, what I'm trying to say is I think it is okay to sometimes think about what could have been, but put it in perspective and just understand that at the end of the day, the trade with Eloy and Cease was made for the purpose of getting Jose Quintana. We should all be happy Jose Quintana is there. But if you want to sometimes admit that, you're like, damn, that guy isn't with us anymore, I think that's okay within reason.
I agree with you. And I don't want any White Sox fans to think I'm shitting on Eloy Jimenez. I don't. I think he's going to be really good. You just never know. Quintana is a known commodity. You knew what you were going to get. You'd proven it in the majors, and you had to, when you get a known commodity at the major league level, you have to give up a whole lot in potential as far as minor leaguers. So if Eloy works out and ascends like he should, then the White Sox probably got the better end of the deal. But there was a whole lot more risk on the White Sox end of taking the deal because you never, like you said, you never know if that guy is just a minor league phenomenon and can't put it together in the pros or what. But, you do see him and you just kind of shed a little bit of a tear because you're like, dang, look at that guy.
I mean, it felt like just yesterday Jimenez was in the Cubs farm system and he was Roy Hobbsing it with light towers. Do you remember that?
Yes.
That was pretty insane. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Quintana is a proven commodity. He's essential part of this team. And you know what? If Jose Quintana helps us win another World Series, then it's honestly going to hurt less. I mean, right now, you're overall glad that you have Jose Quintana. There's a little bit of hurt when it comes to losing Eloy, but that little bit of hurt will probably shrink even more if the Cubs win another World Series. I mean, look, I don't sit in bed thinking about Gleyber Torres because we won the World Series in 2016, even though it was just for a rental closer. I don't think of Gleyber Torres at all. And the only reason that I'll probably think about Eloy Jimenez a little more than I ever do Gleyber Torres is because he's on the other side of town and, you're exposed to what he does on a daily basis, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's, you're going to see it on TV every night when you watch the highlights. I don't watch Yankees highlights very often. I'm probably will, and if you see more highlights this year, it won't be Gleyber Torres. It'll be the new Bash brothers.
Exactly.
So do you want to move on to the Hawks or Bulls?
We'll go Hawks.
I don't really want to talk about individual games because they stink. I mean, what was it? Was it yesterday or Friday when they gave up 4 power play goals and gave up a lead in the third again? It's just ugly play. But I do want to talk about this potential silver lining here. Think back to the last several games, and you saw John Hayden playing well, Matt Highmore playing well, Eric Gustafson playing well, Alex DeBrincat playing well, Nick Schmaltz playing well. You know what all those players have in common?
They're young.
They are under 25 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So you do have young talent ready to come and help you. This is a pretty abysmal season as a whole, but it was exaggerated, number one, because of the Corey Crawford injury. And so you'll have Crawford next year, hopefully. And you're going to have these players having another season under their belt and ready to play. You just hope that the young talent will spark something and help you reclaim that window of championship opportunity.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've been trying to look at that whole perspective as well, because there's been a lot of times this season where I kept thinking, oh, dark days are ahead, dark days are ahead. But I've been trying to look at that same perspective as well. Obviously, only time will tell, but I certainly hope it works out that way. Like I said, I think the most promising thing is that young core. A lot's going to depend on Corey Crawford, boy. That's really going to be a factor. And we don't really know 100% what the deal is there. So I'm not sure I can make a full assessment on him, but I hope to God he's back in 100% next year.
Yeah, it's also going to depend on some Duncan Keith too. Is he's had some real stinkers this season, and he's had some turnover issues which you never had seen before from him.
Yeah, it's pretty ugly.
So you just hope that he can clean some of that up and at least hold steady for a little bit. And that's going to help. But Crawford is going to be the big key. Is he comes back, everything looks better as a whole, because he's a top 5 goalie.
Yeah, he's absolutely elite. He's absolutely a game changer. I sure hope that this season proved that to all the Crawford haters out there. I don't know what else has to be done. I thought 2 Stanley Cups would do it. I guess not. I thought a great season last year would do it. I guess not. But not having him around after showing that you were better with him around, shouldn't that be enough to show by now?
You'd think, but there's always going to be people that are just mad. It's part of being a sports fan. But the Blackhawks made 2 extensions this past week. They signed Jan Rudolph to a 1-year, $2.25 million extension, which I think left most people scratching their heads, because Jan Rudolph had some rough outings this year.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of him. I mean, he's a decent scorer, but he's had some really rough times defensively. He's shown some promise. There just hasn't really been any consistency defensively. And, people could say, oh, it's his first year. Keep in mind, he's already in his upper 20s. So he's not young.
Yeah, he's definitely not young. I think he's the leading scorer of defensemen with the Blackhawks this year.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
But it's pretty poor, because nobody's scoring from the Blue Liners. But then they extended Eric Gustafsson 2 years at 1.2 each year, which is a little bit more than I thought they would get. But I'm okay with that signing. That one's okay, because he's shown some life this year.
Yeah. You just got to hope it keeps building on that.
I mean, honestly, in the offseason, I think the Blackhawks need to add a top 4 defenseman if they want to do anything. I think that's their biggest need.
Oh, absolutely. Just the question is, how do they do that?
I mean, they've got some money to play with this offseason, but they've got to be smart about it, and they've got to add a defenseman that's not too old, because they're going to need him to carry either Keith or Seabrook for the next couple of years.
Right. I mean, you just wish that you can magically generate a young, quick, speedy defenseman that has all the tools. You wish you had some kind of factory that could make a couple for your core. It's going to be hard to get that ideal guy. Because obviously,
Nick Leddy.
it's not like
Nick Leddy.
Don't remind me. But I mean, it's not like you could just draft a guy. Oh, here he is. No, it's like baseball. You have a farm system. They have to develop first. So yeah, it's a little more difficult.
But there's only one. I mean, I just wanted to kind of gloss over the Blackhawks. I didn't want to talk too much, but there's one thing that really popped up and it just stuck in my craw. And that is the Brad Marchand hit on Anthony Duclair.
Yeah, I didn't see that live, but I've seen the video.
I don't know how you can watch that and not say it was a dirty hit.
Oh, he was trying to move around. He was trying to make that look like an accident, but it looked pretty intentional to me.
He aimed directly at his head and left his skates or left the ice. Like, I don't know how else you can say that. I mean, Marchand's already a dirty player.
I was going to say, this is nothing new.
Yeah, this is not new. This is, I just, it was dirty, and I don't know how you can say it's not. It was a cheap shot, and I don't know. It really pissed me off.
Yeah, it's same here. I know it wasn't damaging to a playoff race, but it was still one of your guys, and it was, a dirty play on one of your guys, and no matter what, you're going to be unhappy about that. And of course, you see Boston sports writers trying to defend him, yada, yada. And it's like, well, no surprise. But luckily, you see them getting crapped on by everyone else because it looks pretty intentional to me. I was pretty upset about it. Obviously, not as upset as other hits. You're probably thinking of the one I was most upset about in recent years. But it was definitely something.
Rafi Torres on Hossa.
He
that
killed him.
Yeah, that was probably one of the most egregious hits and I can remember of. And the only one I can think of that was worse than that is man, I can't remember the names, but the guy chased him down from behind and hit him in the back of the head with a stick.
Was that in recent years?
It was probably 15 years ago. And it was they were talking about pressing criminal charges. Got suspended for a year. Now I have to Google this.
Yeah, but we were saying about the Raffy hit. Not only was I pissed about that, but the Hawks got penalized for retaliating. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And I don't think I screamed at the TV at a Hawks game louder than that moment, except for maybe one other time. But oh my God, I was red in the face mad when that all unfolded. Why are you trying to find that? Did you see that dirty basketball play that's been going around on the internet?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you got to see this. The guy was going up for a dunk. The kid comes behind, jumps up, pushes him. His body goes flying and just bangs into like the board and the post, and he goes down.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was disgustingly dirty.
Oh, here was. It was Todd Bertuzzi on Steve Moore.
Todd Bertuzzi on Steve.
It was 2004. He sucker punched him in the back of the head and ended Steve Moore's career.
Okay, I'm watching this on YouTube now, so
Bertuzzi got it suspended indefinitely, and they didn't reinstate him until after the lockout. Criminal charges were brought against him.
Did that all was he actually like charged, or were they dropped?
It says criminal charges were later brought against him, although he was given a conditional discharge.
Okay. And this is when he was with Colorado, yeah.
Oh, Bertuzzi. Well, Colorado was Moore, and then Bertuzzi
was the Canucks.
Who he played, and he drove his head right into the ice. It was bad. Yeah, Steve Moore, that ended his career there.
Ugh. Yeah, I'm just seeing them fight now. I haven't seen the actual incident, but yeah, sounds pretty bad. If he's lying on the ice now, they're gonna have to show the replay. There is blood everywhere. Yuck. But yeah, that was when I was little, so I don't remember seeing that live. But the more that you mention this, I remember this being mentioned. But yeah, that's wow. Wow, the coaches were like trying to climb over the glass to get to the other bench. That they were wow. Yeah, this is something.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, the Rafi Torres was probably the most egregious one. Besides that, so I mean, the Marchand hit on Duclair wasn't to those level, but it was still pretty egregious.
Yeah, no, definitely.
But yeah, I mean, there's not much else to talk about with the Blackhawks. They stink. The season is done. They should.
Just a few more weeks left.
There's what, 12 games left?
Yeah.
So there's zero chance that they're making the playoffs. I mean, they're what, like 12 or 14 points out of the last wild card spot, and they'd have to leapfrog 4 teams. There's like the slimmest chance, and everything in the world would have to align for that to happen.
I haven't really looked at the chances in weeks now, just because there's like no point. We know it's over.
Yeah, so that's about it for the Blackhawks. I just kind of wanted to bring up the couple signings and try to put some positive spin, and then talk about that dirty hit.
Yeah, I got nothing else.
The last thing I want to talk about is there was a couple things with the Bulls. I mean, this is another tanking turd season, but the commissioner basically told the Bulls to stop sitting Robin Lopez and Holiday, because the Bulls were just sitting these guys, and they were just like, you can't do this. And it was weird that they called out, of all the teams that are tanking, they called out the Bulls. And I've heard a couple different theories about it. And one, it's definitely they wanted the Bulls to stop doing that. But I heard another rumor that it was, somebody explained it, is when Coach Daly was the coach of the Pistons, if he wanted to yell at Isaiah Thomas, he couldn't yell at Isaiah Thomas because Isaiah Thomas didn't take things well. He would yell, if he wanted to yell at Isaiah Thomas, he would yell at John Sally. And the message would go, Isaiah Thomas would get the message because John Sally was getting yelled at, but he said John Sally could take it. And I think it's one of those type things where they're sending a message to a bunch of people in the league via yelling at the Bulls.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when I thought about this whole thing, I'm like, yeah, they're tanking, but they're still one of your most profitable franchises.
Yeah, I mean, it's sure, it's definitely they're tanking by not playing those two, but Robin Lopez and Holiday, how many games are they winning for you? If you play those guys every day in the games that they've been sitting, what do you win? Maybe 1, maybe 2 more. They're still firmly entrenched in that 8th place. They're not going anywhere else.
You're playing as a rebuilding team. What does a rebuilding team do? They play their kids because they're your future. That's what the Bulls are doing. They're trying to see what they could get out of their own kids. I mean, it's not like you're benching them too, because the kids have contributed to a number of the wins that they have had. It's not like they're just playing G Leaguers. They're playing their future.
I'm looking at the Tankathon. There's a website called tankathon.com, and I'm quickly looking at it. Memphis has lost 17 games in a row.
Ooh.
17 games in a row.
And, with all the Tankathon simulations I've done and the chances and where the Bulls are now, I think we could kind of say bye-bye top 3 pick.
I mean, they still could. They're not that. They're
technically, yeah, but
I mean, they're only 3.5 games from being the 3rd worst record, which would give them a 42.5% chance of being a top 3. But I mean, Orlando and Atlanta and Brooklyn and Sacramento and Dallas, they all really suck.
They're much worse than the Bulls.
I mean, the Bulls aren't gaining any ground on the top 7 or the worst 7 teams. Actually, they're the Knicks are closing in on taking over the 8th spot because they've lost 7 in a row.
Yeah.
I mean, so that the Bulls are actually getting higher in the standings by going 3-7 in their last 10.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, the trend is when the Bulls play these bad teams, you expect the Bulls to win. I mean, people expected them to beat the Mavs at the game I was at, and even though it was awful, they did. The Bulls beat the Atlanta Hawks today, at least I think so. So these really bad teams, it says a lot when you're saying the Bulls should win these games. It's clearly telling you that these other teams are worse than the Bulls.
But the other thing that came up was Vincent Goodwill wrote an article about how there's going to be impending, how did he describe it? There's going to be a strife between Zach LaVine and Chris Dunn because a pecking order has to get established between those two. Who's the number 1? Who's the number 2? Who's the number 3? If you throw in Markkanen. And they put in some quotes in there from Zach LaVine, who said, "You can't be friends with everybody." And Chris Dunn was quoted as saying, "We're young. Right now, nobody wants to step on each other's toes." You start reading into that, and you're like, both of these guys want to be the alpha, and there can only be one alpha.
Yeah. And I mean, the competitive nature could be a good thing, but you don't want to create too much tension here.
No, you hope that it becomes it naturally figures itself out, and if it once it all aligns of who's the number 1, who's the number 2, that you create harmony and you get a working system there. That's your hope, because if you've got a bunch of guys that are jockeying for the position, odds are nobody's taking the reins and you're not playing well enough to compete. Your hope is that when the order gets established, that ultimately makes you stronger as a team.
Yeah, I mean, if one guy is the alpha and the other guy is right below him, and you're seeing the results of wins, because hopefully, more than anything, they want to win. So if they're seeing those results, hopefully they'll just accept that. I know sometimes in sports, personal egos can get in the way of pretty much everything, but you just hope that whoever isn't the alpha and they're seeing the results work, then they'll say, okay, winning is the most important thing.
I mean, what's honestly going to make this a little easier is Zach LaVine's the scorer and Chris Dunn is a facilitating point guard. So you hope that sort of makes it easier, is one feeds the other one, and that sort of figures itself out. But Zach LaVine or Chris Dunn was a score first type point guard. This could make for a much rougher transition, but I think this naturally sort of works its way out because Zach LaVine is just a scorer and Chris Dunn is a playmaking point guard.
Right.
But there's one last thing I wanted to talk about before we hopped off here. And, every week I like to talk about a couple guys from one position in the NFL draft. And we've already gone through a few positions. We've gone through tight ends, the quarterbacks, the running backs. This week is the linebacker, or last week we did offensive linemen. This week is linebackers. And there was a couple of guys I wanted to talk about. Not too many this week. I ran out of time watching film. But there was a couple of guys I wanted to talk about. And the first one was, he's a really intriguing guy because of one thing, but it's also one of his limiting factors. And that's Shaquem Griffin, linebacker out of Central Florida, 6'1", 233. This guy is really fast. He can run with pretty much any player on the field. Aggressive, attacking, understands the defense. He can rush the passer or drop into coverage. He can play true outside linebacker in a 4-3, but he can rush the passer in a 3-4. The cons on him, I've read a lot of reports on him, and nobody will actually say the con. They'll say repercussions because of the con, but I'm going to come out and say it. The guy's got one hand. He has one hand. He's missing a hand. This is going to cause him to miss even more tackles in the NFL than it did in college. If this guy had two hands, he's probably a mid to high second rounder, but he's got one hand. So he's probably going to be a 5th round pick. And that's the sad reality of the NFL. It's a game of inches, and you can't afford to have a guy that is going to have a hard time making tackles on one half side of his body because he can't grab on anything. Next guy is Roquan Smith, 6'1", 236 out of Georgia. This guy is an absolute phenomenal athlete. Great wheels on him, good tackler, really good instincts. He's able to maneuver around blockers to get to the ball carrier. Really high football IQ guy. Is able to read the play, anchored that Georgia defense. Really good football player. But some of the cons I had him is when he isn't in the play, he sort of gives up on running after it. He'll just jog. He's a little bit undersized, and he's a guy that when he gets a block established on him, he has a hard time disengaging from it. But he's a player that was really good in college, and I see him actually improving in the NFL. He reminds me a lot of Brian Urlacher. Then there's Tremaine Edmonds. This is the guy I think the Bears are probably going to draft in the 1st round. 6'5", 253. This guy's from NFL stock. His dad was a 2-time Pro Bowler. He's got a really unique size-speed combo, athletic freak, has the frame to easily put on muscle and not slow down. He can run in coverage. He can rush the passer. He's really physical. He's a great matchup versus backs or tight ends. The big cons on him are his instincts aren't that good, doesn't have a really high football IQ, and he'll bite on fakes. He's going to need to study his playbook really hard. He's going to need a good defensive coordinator that's going to work with him. And he might have some rough outings in his rookie year, but I think this guy's going to be a real stud. And I sort of see him as the Bears pick, and I think you'll see him ascend a lot like Leonard Floyd. So that's all I had for just those couple guys I looked at. So if there's anybody else that you guys want me to look at, or there's other positions you want me to evaluate a player, just let me know. I never know where to draw the line. Sometimes it's just running out of time. Sometimes it's I don't want to spend half the show on it. But if there's a guy you want to look at, just definitely reach out. Is there anything else you want to add, Alex?
No, I think I covered pretty much everything I wanted to say.
All right. Well, I guess that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. I want to thank everybody for listening. Please make sure you subscribe however you listen to podcasts, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, or the TuneIn app. Share with your friends. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes.
Bears 31 to -7.
The Bears.
Oh, when the Bears go bearing down.